Well, welcome back. And we will now start the second session for this afternoon, where we're discussing the data-driven decisions. Now, how can this explosion of data enable us to shift to data-driven decision making? Can we measure the performance of property and people and the link between them? Are just some of the questions that this panel would be exploring this afternoon. So before we start the discussion, I would like to quickly introduce the panelists to all of you. We have with us Mr. Mohammad Kaiser Azad from Emaar Community Management. He is one of the founding members of Community Management and has been instrumental in shaping the property landscape developed by Emaar in Dubai and the Middle East. He has with him over 17 years of experience in the property and community management, and Mr. Kaiser's strategic orientation has a proven track record in successfully master planning, value chain management, customer experience, digital transformation, cost optimization, and sustainability and crisis management. A technology enthusiast himself, Mr. Kaiser has been a prime system architect who conceptualized the Emaar Smart Asset Management System. Also joining the panel is Mr. Talhouk, the Chief Operating Officer of Socienta. He is the senior executive with over 25 years of experience in the business development, sales management, and operations management across the Middle East and Africa. Armed with a multi-industry experience and a specialty in PropTech, financial services, and telecommunications, Mr. Ghassan co-founded two startups, that is Addresscope and Socienta. We also have with us Mr. Paul Bogan, the Chief Digital Officer from Serco Middle East. Mr. Paul has with him over 20 years of experience in innovative technology-enabled solutions in both the private and public sectors across the UK and the Middle East. Mr. Paul is responsible for aspects such as digital asset management, workforce management, and the use of big data to drive the expansion of the company's technology offerings. Now, driven by passion for technology, Paul's knowledge and experience is vital to the advancement of Serco Middle East value propositions. We also have with us Mr. Siddiq Farid, the CEO and the co-founder of SmartCrowd. Mr. Siddiq has with him over 12 years of professional experience working in a variety of sectors. Being passionate about executing on big ideas, he founded SmartCrowd, that is MENA's first regulated digital real estate platform, in an attempt to make real estate accessible to the masses. Siddiq was successful in becoming the first regulated platform in creating a digital real estate investment platform, unlocking real estate to everyday investors. And moderating the session this afternoon is Dr. Anas Bataw, the Director of Center of Excellence in Smart Construction. So Dr. Anas has contributed to the development and the execution of government strategies, guidelines, and the initiatives in the digital transformation and smart cities globally. With a strong technical and leadership abilities, Dr. Anas has established and led programs that are responsive to the needs of rapidly growing economies and disruptive industries in the UK, UAE, Saudi, Singapore, Qatar, India, and Malaysia. So viewers, please note that you can post in your questions in the chat box, and do let us know who you're addressing the question to so that our panel will be able to take them on accordingly during the course of the discussion. And we do have the event feed where you can leave in your suggestion, your feedback of any of the sessions that you had attended as well. Over to you, Dr. Anas.
Thank you, Mega. Thank you. And welcome everyone, speakers and panelists and attendees. As Mega mentioned today, today's panel will be talking about data and how data can help us with driving decisions within the built environment. Joined with an esteemed panel, I'll start asking the questions that we've set up for this topic. But as Mega mentioned, please feel free to ask any questions you feel. I'll start off with you, Kaiser. As mentioned, you've got a good experience in community management, setting up the team in Emaar and also from your recent MSc as well. I'd like to start off with you with a question in terms of data. We hear about data and how important it is, and how we are living in a world right now where data is more important than oil, and the fact that 90% of the world data has been created or developed or merged in the last 2 to 3 years. Why is it important to have access to this data in a timely manner to provide a good insights for the management of the built environment in general, or the management and operation of buildings?
Thank you, Dr. Anas, for posing the question, and welcome to all the attendees and the panelists, and for the organizers for this event. I'd like to start off with a statement. You can't manage what you don't measure, right? If you look at processing data, we've been processing data in our own way since the beginning of time. You're buying a car, you're buying a home, or just a simple phone. You process these various points and features to make that informed decision before you spend money and time. There was a research done by McKinsey's in North America where they analyzed 330 public listed companies, and they found out that the top third of the companies, 5% were more productive and 6% were more profitable than their competitors in their respective industries, just by using data-driven decisions. That gives you a kind of a wild thought, and you can imagine the profitability and the productivity that comes along with data-driven decisions. And in today's business environment, we're working in a very fast pace, in a very dynamic environment. Everything needs to happen now, this very second. And time is of essence, where you use the time to gain your competitive advantage. There's no time for old-fashioned meeting where you're sitting across the table and discussing strategies and ideas. There's just no time for it, because everything is so critical and urgent that you need to stay ahead and relevant. There are thousands of data points that we use on a daily basis, from our sensors, from our meters, from our consumer behavior, from complaint management, suggestion feedback, and the list just goes on. And these data are just right in front of us, talking to us, screaming out at us, that are just so important for us to manage our built environment. And analyzing this data, going deep into the learning process, generating valuable insight, helps us to better manage, operate, save costs, increase efficiency, set goals and important KPIs with one key objective in mind, that is serving our customers better.
Absolutely. Paul, do you have a comment on that, or maybe a follow-up?
Yeah, I think
why it's important to access data in the right time, and as Kaiser mentioned, we have data all around us. How do we manage this data, and how can we access it in the right time?
Yeah, that's right. I mean, I'll just add to what Kaiser said, very eloquently put, and the reference to the McKinsey report, I think was great. It's really about business agility, isn't it? Being able to make informed, quicker decisions with all the available information. And I think one of the key things we have, certainly with our customers and working with people like Emaar, is the transparency. It's having corroborated, demonstrable data that both of you can look at together and use that data-driven insights to inform decisions of where you both proactively move forward in the right direction. And I think that builds and enhances a level of trust within your relationship as you move forward with your partners. And one of the other key elements, I think, is just before I pass on, understanding the customer journey of the end consumer, of the communities that Emaar deliver, or the operations that Serco provide, understanding their touch points within the journeys, and then looking at that data to improve the overall end-to-end customer experience, I think, is absolutely key on using timely access to available data.
Absolutely. Now, Siddiq, just to bring into the conversation, there's so much data available, as mentioned, and sometimes this data can be very overwhelming. It's especially to know where to start from with this data. What kind of KPIs that can be set up in terms of knowing what you need out of this data, what kind of focus that you need to have in order to gain the right insights of this data?
Yeah, no, data is the new gold, right? That's what they say. And there's lots of structured and unstructured data, so you have to be very careful as to what you're getting yourself into. And sometimes when you're doing data analytics, sometimes there's a lot of fake correlation or causations that can lead to wrong decisions. So you have to be very careful in terms of how you are evaluating them. So it's very critical as to, before you embark on doing any data analytics or understanding the data, you need to have certain objectives and certain hypotheses rather, in place, and you need to test those hypotheses, and you need to see the trends, etc., and do backward testing to ensure that the analysis that you're doing makes sense or not. But data is very important, right? It helps you take emotions out of decisions. It becomes more factual. It allows you to make more informed decisions, and timely data is absolutely critical, right? We're in a stage we live in an environment where things are moving at a rapid pace, right? If you don't get data in real time, you're far behind in terms of your ability to make effective decisions that can save a lot of money or time, just efficiencies. So we obviously look at it from a very different perspective, right? So for us, it's mostly from an investment perspective. So we look at very qualitative and quantitative data, some very readily available, some not very readily available, some very structured, some not very structured. And we try to create it in a way and present it to our audiences to give them access so they can make well-informed decisions, right? Because if you look at an average person trying to invest in real estate, you hear so many headlines in the papers, etc., about what's happening with the real estate market and so forth. And part of those headlines are very misleading when you start looking into the actual data as to what's actually happening and so forth. It's and even then, a lot of people don't have access to that information. And even if they do, they don't have the ability to really filter through and create concrete conclusions. So it's very helpful, and it can also be very detrimental to you if not utilized appropriately.
Thanks, Siddiq. Now, Ghassan, Siddiq have touched on the data from the financial KPIs per se, and I know you're sitting on the other side of the table. What KPIs do you tend to look at, and how these KPIs could benefit the end users?
Thank you, Dr. And so this is a very close to my heart issue, actually. I worked a lot with KPIs in my previous roles. I even did my thesis on the KPIs, right? The biggest challenge we see is what kind of KPIs to set and what to focus on, with the abundance of data that my fellow panelists already spoke about. My approach, or the way I like to take it, is to adopt the balanced scorecard concept. As most of you probably know, it, balanced scorecard is a concept by Kaplan and Norton. It was developed in the early 90s, I believe in 1990. And it's basically a performance management tool that is used by the leadership team, and that should be aligned to the company's goals and strategy, right? It should be aligned to the strategy. So you pick your KPIs based on the strategy. And going to your question, those KPIs are usually divided into 4 categories. They are not all financial. So there will be a financial category, a customer category, internal processes category, and learning and growth. And the maximum recommended number usually would be 25 KPIs. And usually, like in big companies, there's a big fight to agree which KPI to be on the scorecard, because the leadership team will have visibility and focus on this one, right? So it's like traffic lights. It's a 3-color code: green, amber, and red. If it's green, you're doing well. If it's amber, watch out. If it's red, there is something wrong. And from experience, and this is something many companies fall into, it's a trap. From experience, people become so focused on lighting the KPI green that they forget on the way to reach green. And we call it the watermelon effect. So it's green from the outside, but red from the inside. So you did light your KPI green, but the way you reached there isn't necessarily the best way or the best interest for your client or for your own company. So a lot of processes and regulations need to be put in order to manage the, I call it the road to green. So that for me is the best way to pick your KPIs, focus on them, and manage them as you go. And they should be changed as the company grows. KPIs should change. They shouldn't stay the same.
Interesting. Thanks for that, Ghassan. Paul, what is the potential of looking at what's the negativity or the challenges or the potential issues if the companies do set up wrong KPIs? And Ghassan mentioned that you set up KPIs according to your strategy and etc. What if these KPIs are set up in the wrong way, or potentially they haven't been updated according to some of the changes or the challenges that the company is facing?
Yeah, it's really interesting question. I was enjoying what Ghassan was saying there, because I did want to add one thing just to sort of put it out to the panel on the impact of KPIs through the new environmental, social, and corporate governance that we're all going through now. You know, I think we track our social position from equality, diversity, and inclusion, then country value through nationalisation, which is key in region, our governance, ethics, and compliance. But trying to understand, you know, what is the right baseline, first of all, and measurement for how we now start to look at our own carbon footprints within organisation. I would definitely interested in hearing Ghassan's opinion on that. Sorry, specifically to the question, I think it comes back to the opening statement of Kaiser. You have a strategy, you have a business plan, you have budgets, and setting KPIs that are focused on obviously increased revenue and growth, or driving as much as you can to the bottom line is absolutely key. So having the wrong KPIs, in my opinion, and I'm not an expert in this space, but could drive the wrong behaviours, potentially making poor decisions and focusing time and resources in the wrong direction, which ultimately is wastage and cost to the business. Thank you.
Interesting. What are the? Do you have some examples of where you've seen companies struggle to grow because of these challenges, or because they're looking at the wrong KPIs? You've mentioned sustainability, for example, and decarbonisation, etc. We've seen a lot of organisations that have done this quite early, and they've achieved a lot from it. And there's organisations that they haven't looked at the data, etc. in regards to that, and some of them not even started yet. And as I said, you know, you guys are looking at it, and I'm sure you've been looking at it for some time in terms of how can you drive low carbon emissions or decarbonisation or net zero carbon, etc. Have you seen what happens to these organisations? And I know we've got a lot of examples. If you go outside of the built environment, the kind of organisations that don't look at the latest trends and etc. from the data that they gather and go maybe looking at the data the wrong way. Have we got examples of or challenges that we can highlight from the construction industry or the built environment in general?
I think I'll pass that on to the esteemed panel if anyone has a more specific example than I.
I will jump in over here.
Yeah. Okay.
I think what Ghassan and Paul rightly said is the strategy, right? If you have the right strategy, right vision, and that is ready for adoption, you have to look at your micro and your macro environment, right? And there are immense data point, and it's not just about top down, but there's a lot of bottom up interaction, because your real data is sitting at the bottom. Yeah, all your processes, all the execution that happens is at the bottom. So the fluid interaction between the top and the bottom needs to be so easy that data can be extracted and measured. I mean, if you have the wrong KPIs, if you have the wrong strategy, you'd have to shut down your business in a few days or a few years. You know, it's simple as that. You won't be able to survive in this competitive environment. But the example that I can relate from my industry is that if your operational targets are not smart enough, are not measurable, as I said, if you can't measure, you're nowhere. You can't manage that, you can't measure. So you're looking at, you know, you're falling out from your customers, you are losing your financial targets. If you have, you know, sustainability credits or carbon emission credits, all of those slowly disintegrate over time. And as an organization, you're left with nothing. So that's just a path to closure of the entire business. So that importance of having smart and measurable KPI, both qualitative and quantitative, is very important for you to sustain in this competitive environment. And most importantly, focusing on what are the customers, what are the sentiments of the customer, what are the behaviors of the customers, usage of customers. These data points are so essential for actually a self-reflection process within the organization and a journey to grow the organization as well. Because without our customers and our partners, we nobody, we don't exist in a business environment. So yeah, I mean, that's how I'll kind of narrate the story over here.
That's a very interesting point of view. Thanks for that, Kaiser. So I'll get back to that topic, but Ghassan, to come back to you. When it comes to data, we talk about analytics, and obviously we talk about the capability of analytics in the industry overall. From your point of view, what is the blind spots that we have that we are missing within the industry in order to achieve the right capabilities for analytics?
Thank you for the question. So there are a lot of blind spots actually that's happening, but it's usually not because of the lack of data, because the data is disintegrated. Companies grew as they go, and their systems grew as well in the same way. And they have siloed systems, right? So today you will have a system for your financials, a CAFM system, probably your customer experience system. So there are a lot of data points out there. But there is no way, or in some cases, there is no way for you to see this data in one view, in one bird's eye view, whereby you can create correlation, whereby you can create cause and effect because of data. Why? Because the systems are so separate, so independent. So the blind spots are being able to create those correlation. So why are people moving out of my buildings? Maybe it's because there are so many incidents happening. But can I see it when it comes to data, when I have hundreds and hundreds of buildings or units? So the ability to turn your data into analytics and into intelligent data is the main blind spot, let alone some companies are still working manual or still working on Excel sheets, etc. In my point of view, the biggest handicap is the linkage between the data and the correlation between the data points that can create intelligence for companies.
Thank you. Siddiq, what's from your side? I know you look at things heavily from a financial insight. What challenges do you face, or what challenges do you see when it comes to analytics capabilities?
That's a good question. So, what's interesting over here is there's lots of, so we try to do a couple of different things with data, right? We try to look at data to understand the opportunity at present, and then we try to look at data to build some predictive capabilities to understand, okay, where are good opportunities for us to invest in terms of supply and demand, the migration of population, et cetera, and so forth. So, the good thing in UAE in general, I think within the region, probably one of the best places for open data and so forth. So we do have access to a lot of transparency data and so forth compared to other places. But there's still a lot of limitations in terms of how easily accessible that data is, right? Like, for example, sometimes we struggle to make conclusions in terms of where the migration is happening, right? So one of the key elements that we like to utilize is DIVA data, right? Where are the connection requests happening? Where are the disconnection requests happening? To understand where the supply demand situations are, right? Because you read headlines, oh, there's too much supply in the market. Well, yes, but there's also demand in the market. You need to filter through that as to where the demand is, where the supply is, and that's a very good telltale sign. The other thing we look at is Google traffic trends, right? Where is traffic increasing, and so forth during rush hours? That gives you an idea in terms of where people are moving towards and so forth. But not all this data is very readily able to structure it. You got to build a lot of sophisticated data models, and sometimes you get caught up in having very poor quality of data, right? So, for example, land department has a lot of data that's available, but it's in a very unstructured manner. So unless you have sophisticated tools, it's very difficult for you to formulate them in a very useful manner. Thankfully, there are data providers in the market focused on real estate data, right? So the likes of Property Monitor, Reddit, and so forth, that take this data, structure it in a way where it becomes very digestible for investors and so forth, right? But there's lots of opportunities in terms of creating, big data lakes and so forth. So it becomes challenging in terms of how you have the right tools and the quality and way to verify the quality of the data too. So you're making the right decisions. But you always, you can't just blindly, once you set it up and you sort of put it on autopilot, I think you have to continuously go and review them from time to time to ensure that, the things that you're looking at, do they still make sense or not? Because, the quality of data can do time, right? And it can lead you to in the wrong direction if you're not sure about the source and the quality of that source.
Absolutely. Following on from Siddiq and Ghassan's comments, I'll throw this question out there for anyone to grab in it. It's quite a general question. What are the best practices or recommendations you could provide to operators out there to follow in order to access and be able to have reliable and accurate data? What are the different practices or best practices?
Yeah, I'm happy to go have an initial go, and just sort of adding back to that previous question and then following up. I think if you take a step back, we're all obviously proficient in how we understand data management. It's complex. It's really complex. And so I think the biggest blind spot and the biggest gap in the industry as a whole is that everyone assumes data management is easy and that anyone can do it well. So certainly from my experience, speaking to my customers from our Serco services to government organisations, there is a real lack of education, training and understanding at an executive and leadership level of what data management is. As you move from reporting into business insight application technology, and then getting down into machine learning, deep learning, AI algorithms to try and predict or have a probable position going forward is I think lacking within the market. So I think education and training is absolutely key. Not being scared to bring your capability into the business that have some of these specializations and skill sets, because you have to set up processes, you have to set up workflows to capture data in a way which is clean and consistent. Then there's a cleanliness in the treatment, and then there is a myriad of different applications you can use to try and drive new insights that inform those decision making going forward. So I think certainly for me, these are some of the best practices, and it's about continuous improvement. You inherently, the more data you capture, the more noise you bring in within your models. And so it's a continuous improvement of looking to move forward.
I can take this as well. So building on what Paul said, data should not be the end goal, right? Data is the tool we're using in order to reach the end goal. So my advice would be look at your end goal and reverse engineer it. So the way we do it, or the way we think about it. So for an operator or a management company to be successful, they need to look at three things, in my personal opinion. They need to look at economic sustainability, environmental sustainability, and social sustainability, right? When we're talking social sustainability, this means we're looking at understanding the tenant's behavior, understanding their affinity. When we're talking about economic, it's removing the bottlenecks from the operation. When we're talking about environmental, we're talking about eliminating or uncovering and eliminating inefficiencies. How can we do that? We look at data. We need all kinds of data. We need usage data. We need affinity data. We need operational data. So look at where you're going. This is your strategy. Build your KPIs, build your balanced scorecard if you want, and reverse engineer it to see what kind of data you need And this is where you start your transformation journey or digital transformation journey. We in the built environment are still lagging behind other industries when it comes to automation. And I believe this is an advantage in a way or another, because now we have better technologies out there that we can make use of. So if we start planning with the end in mind, we can really make best use of the technologies that exist over there.
Interesting.
I will jump in again right now on this. So if you look at reality, and these are global statistics, right? 60 to 70% of data in an organization is untapped. These dark, unseen data points, is what the organizations need to target. Process-related data, time and motion study. How long does it get, to get from point A to point B? What is the turnaround time to complete a project or an assignment? Historic information from surveys, sensory alarms, equipment, geographic data. All of these are quite diverse and spread out that they've never been tapped into or lack of, right? So focusing on mining and really scrubbing this data to get it clean, and understanding a data source. What are your touch points that are driving this data? And then, of course, the people engagement across the organization to seek data and knowledge, and like what the panelists say, structure all these unstructured data to remove all the biases, outliers, personal representations, and the true consolidation and correlation to remove similarities. And you keep drilling downstream as much as you can go until every observation, every variable that drives your organization business is actually accounted for. And if I have to look at data into three buckets, right? How to utilize data into three buckets. Bucket A is where you are having descriptive analytics using your data, right? Bucket B is predictive, where you're using your data, those analysis to predict future behavior or future trends. And then you have your third bucket, which is your prescriptive data. This is where you're being a bit more proactive, where you're using the AI technology, deep learning, neural network, all those technologies that are available today to start prescribing what the consumer would want, when the equipment would fail. If the equipment is failing, what are the actions that you need to do? Because you have all this historic data of maintenance, of reactive calls from customers or from breakdowns, where you start gathering this information and then utilizing these three buckets of data analytics to reach the final stage to where you're able to prescribe solution using machine learning and AI. Your systems are able to prescribe solutions, what needs to be done. What this in turn happens is that you increase your internal efficiency, your effectiveness, and both go hand in hand. You can be efficient, but if you're not effective, it doesn't matter. But if you're effective and not efficient, that's the other way around. It doesn't work as well. So I think that's the journey everybody should look into, and identifying the right technology. I hear a lot of companies saying smart solution, smart system, but what is the definition of smart? What is the definition of smart for you may not be the definition of smartness for me, because you need to kind of consolidate and then think, what is your vision? What is your strategy? Where are you going to head in the next 5 to 10 years? I mean, I always say this, I don't believe in a 5-year vision anymore, because we're in such a dynamic environment that you may have a vision, but your strategy is nothing but an action plan. Your strategy needs to be so dynamic and adaptive to the demands of the market that are changing every second today.
Absolutely. Which it's been really interesting comments. We've touched on data science. We've touched on processes and procedures and etc. But one thing I wanted to just touch on is culture, because these things do exist. Data science exists in other industries, and a lot of industries utilize it much better than we do in the built environments. The processes and procedures, similar to the process Azad mentioned about the green light and how to approach it, and the watermelon, which we'll come back to in a minute. These are processes and procedures that can be used, and it looks really good, and I'm sure that it has been put in practice, etc. But what about the culture that we have within the built environment? Do we have a culture at the moment that really looks into making decisions driven from data? And again, that's a question I'd like to throw out there.
Not enough, not yet. I don't think enough. Sorry to jump in, Kaiser. I'll speak from. I think you're probably going to get a more objective point of view from me than these gentlemen that are in the building business and construction business. I don't think there's enough of a culture yet. Not just here in the region. I think globally. If you look at historically, real estate construction businesses have always sort of lagged in technology innovation and so forth. I sort of put myself in that category, and I don't mean any disrespect to my colleagues on this, generally speaking. But I think with the importance of sustainability as that becoming the forefront, I think it's about time that those things are being recognized. There's still a long way to go, but there's a lot of big steps that have been taking place in terms of green initiatives, sustainable goals, etc. And what's important is, people are starting to realize that has an impact on the bottom line, right? We have a few colleagues over here that are in community management. One of the biggest challenges for us from an investment point of view is, the cost of servicing the units in the buildings, right? The service charges, they're quite expensive, right? And with the rents coming down, they become a bigger component of your rental income that is being generated, which hurts the returns. So, having efficiencies there in terms of how the buildings are managed and how data is utilized to create efficiencies, do cost savings, whether it's consumption of electricity, water, general maintenance, and so forth, better upkeep of the building and performance and so forth will lead to lower cost of carrying that unit, which will enhance returns, attracting more capital, etc. So that the cycle starts, but it's a long-term play, right? And I think as people start seeing the benefits of it, more and more people will be encouraged. And I think that culture is being developed as we speak.
Interesting. Well, talking about culture, and we'll stay on this topic for a little bit, because it does bring a different point of view. Is it maybe because of the fact that within construction still we don't see a person within the organization that looks after the data management and etc. As Paul mentioned, it's not easy process. A lot of people might think, information management easy, but there's a lot more into it. Is it because we do have this role missing? I'm not saying I'm not highlighting as a person here, but maybe as a department, as a role within different departments and etc. that they have to capture data from what they do in day in, day out, and provide that data to the management team or whatever in order to make decisions for the organization? Is that something?
Organizations are spearheading this right now. And I agree with what Siddiq said. Budgetary concerns or lack of technology thereof are some barriers as we speak today, because even when I was doing my post-graduation in data science, people would turn around and ask me, like, what is data science? What are the benefits of this? But then when you start looking at the nitty-gritties of how business are run and decisions are made, you really feel the importance of having the right tool. As Ghassan rightly said, data is a tool for us to drive our business forward and make those, bold decisions, make those constructive decisions to get things moving. And I believe the industry is slowly moving, regardless it's real estate or technology or finance. It is moving in that direction where data is being harnessed, mined, and cleaned to a lot of to great extent to drive performance within the organization. And culture plays such an important role over here, because the first part of the formula for success in an organization is transparent communication. having the right strategy, having the right transparent communication, bottom up and top down, as I always said, is the key. And getting everybody involved, engaged towards a common goal, and immediately hitting the low-hanging fruit, which are the most cost-effective foods for a company to move forward, is so important that, in my opinion, that engagement from top to bottom and bottom up, getting people to drive the company is very important. And that culture needs to, it needs to go down deep into the organization. It's never a one-man show.
Absolutely.
100%. So I agree with what Kaiser just said. And unfortunately, today it's a one-man show. And the reason why it is because of the how hard it is to get the data. So you will have a visionary CEO or a visionary board. They want data, right? And they go to their team, guys, I need this kind of data. It takes them a few days, maybe a week to prepare the data he's looking for. So for them, they're doing an exercise without understanding what's the background of the exercise or what do they want out of it, right? For the leadership team, by the time they get the data, it's already obsolete. It's not a timely data. The solution is to democratize the data, to make it available to everyone. And this needs new systems, this needs modern systems. Once the data is available for everyone, then the culture starts coming in. Then everyone will know, oh, this data is helping me improve my performance or helping me improve my customer satisfaction. But today, in most of the companies, I don't want to say in all of them, of course, there are some people are doing it in a brilliant way. But in most of the companies, it's very few people that have a vision, want the data in order for them to action that vision. But getting this data is extremely difficult and it takes a lot of resources. And as I said previously, by the time they have it, it's already obsolete. Maybe it doesn't mean anything to them.
Interesting. It might also to do with the KPIs as well. People trusting in the data, and that touches on one of the questions that we got from the audience. What are the key rules and guidelines that the panel could suggest in terms of that you need to follow in order to make the right decisions or to make decisions based on data? I know we touched a bit on this, but we still see a bit of hesitance in terms of data that comes out of reports and etc. And we still see people sitting on boards going through this information as well as other information that they may have and their own opinions and etc. and experience. When I say opinions, obviously these people have been in the industry for a long time, in terms of 25, 30 years and etc. And they think, okay, I've got this data, but also there's not much trust into it. What's the right rules and guidelines that we need to have in place in order for people to not follow the data blindly, as Ghassan and Paul mentioned earlier? It's data is a tool to get to where you want to be. It's not the end solution. So how can we make sure this tool is guided with the right rules and processes and etc.? Has anyone have any thoughts on this? There wasn't anyone addressed for that question.
I think it's just because such a large general question, isn't it? And I think we've all been frantically alluding to the same thing. If you intrinsically link your KPIs to your strategy, those are the areas of focus for getting your largest return on investment. And I think what Ghassan alluded to was not having hundreds of KPIs, having very focused KPIs that have a detrimental effect, positive effect to the growth or improving the bottom line, the margin, i.e. the profitability of the company. And if you have KPIs that are intrinsically linked to that, don't really think you can go far wrong.
Okay.
There's a nice saying, I don't know who said it, but I use it. So if you have data, let's look at data. If all we have is opinion, let's go with mine. So yeah. when it's opinions, it's not scientific, right? I have an opinion, you have an opposing opinion. They could both be right, but then the arbitrator would be the data. And if it's structured in a way to make it to be able to analyze it and come up with actions with it. So to answer that question, how you trust data, it's having meaningful data, having data that is aligned to your KPIs that you already did a lot of study to put it in place. Then yes, you can count on it, and it could be the arbitrator between opinions, I would say.
Going back to the KPIs, I've got a question from the audience for you, Ghassan, actually. The question says, if we have the data and we have the KPIs created already on existing data, why does the KPIs need to be changed considering the watermelon effects?
The KPIs need to be changed because I think Kaiser just mentioned it, that the market is so dynamic that your business is changing. So if your business changes, you cannot measure it on old KPIs. So we change the KPI as the business changes. Let's take a very recent example, which is COVID and people having to stay at home, right? Probably many companies changed their KPIs and changed their focus in order to be able to provide to the tenants a better service while working from homes, right? So you cannot focus on the number of visits I'm doing to the building while I cannot visit the building, right? So they have to be dynamic, they have to be aligned to your business. KPIs are there to manage the health of a business. So again, it's like data. They are not the goal. The goal is better performing business or good performing businesses. And I use KPIs to measure them. It's my cockpit. I sit in my cockpit, I look at my KPIs, I need to understand how my business is doing. So I change my business, I change my strategy, my KPIs should align. I hope I answered the question.
Yeah. But and again, I'm throwing this question out there, and maybe Kaiser, you could jump in this, because I know you've done your MSc around that similar topic. In terms of KPIs, how would we know that we've got the wrong KPIs or we've got bad KPIs, let's say? And how does it show in the business? Does the effect of wrong KPIs show in the business and corporate goals?
Definitely. I mean, I get really worried when I see KPIs being achieved at 120%. That's the first alarm bell, right? KPIs should not be easy. Yeah, a lot of organizations, a lot of people, and this is a behavioral thing, right? They would put in easy KPIs. Let's say a qualitative KPI of a project, right? Let's say, quick example of building a new kids playground, right? When I see such KPIs, I'm like, guys, it's a good initiative, but it's something that is our bread and butter. I do not want this at a very senior level of a senior manager or director to see such a KPI, such a goal or such an initiative in their KPI, because it's meaningless. It can be down the chain. So it has to be a bit more objective. When you put in the strategy in place, an organization strategy in place, and as I was saying earlier, there are so many functional, operational items that are around it, where you can tap into data on performance of, let's say, energy consumption or energy management in your building, or the maintenance frequencies in your building, the breakdowns of your building, what are the customer satisfaction in the building, and you start looking at your strategy and mapping them against what is happening operationally, and then you look for channels of improvement. How do you push the envelope for yourself and for your teams to have that right formula to say, okay, the strategy says we need to get our game up by 10 or 15%. Now you break that down into smaller initiatives and smaller KPIs to farm it down the stream to your team members. And if it becomes too easy, as I say, and if you're continuously overachieving something again and again because it's so simple, that's a route to disaster.
Absolutely, route to disaster, and that's exactly what we don't want to see or we don't want to hear. And maybe I'll bring in Siddiq to touch more on this, especially from a financial perspective. That obviously has a bigger impact. I know there's a lot of KPIs out there, but when it comes to the KPI of finance, and if that's not measured in the right way, and I've heard room is that usually data, when it comes to finance, that it's everyone knows how to manage it. We've got in every single company now a CFO, and then usually the CFO role is to look at the data, have their own data in terms of how things are going, and make decisions accordingly. And they've got the right spot within their organization to make that decision. Do you see that a good thing, Siddiq, that the fact that KPIs are mainly looked at within the financial aspects, and it doesn't look at the broader way? And the question really here is basically saying, do I just need to look into my return of investment? If I need to spend a dirham, I need 2 dirham back, or is it the matter of, oh, I've spent 1 dirham, I've also managed to achieve sustainable developments, I managed to do this, I managed to have better productivity, etc., etc. Or do you think the KPIs should be separate from each other, i.e. the financial KPIs?
Well, I think it has to be a holistic approach, right? You can't bifurcate it that way. I think beyond that point, I think if you went back, a decade or so, it was all about X's and O's, right? My revenue, my expenses, my bottom line. I think we live in a world where it's more than just the bottom line, especially if you look at the millennials and so forth, right? It's more about what brand they stand for, etc. So I don't think it's as black and white anymore in terms of shareholder returns, etc. I think people are starting to realize that there's returns beyond, I put in $1 and I get $2 back. There's a lot of multiplying impact of it, and that's why you have to look at the data more holistically, because it might not show up in the bottom line, but it will show up in other places. And it's quite it's hard to this might sound like lip service and so forth, but it does have an impact, right? So if you're doing the right things for the right reasons, it will have an impact on how your people behave, how your people interact, how efficient they are in the organization. The first principle approach in terms of doing what's best for the company and so forth, that will transpire and that will result in savings in ways that you did not think it was if you were just looking from a numbers perspective. It will have an impact on how your customers view you, right? And how they interact and how much they spend and the kind of loyalty they show, etc. So it will help financial returns in the long term. It might not have an immediate impact, right? And we live in a society world, in capital markets where people are so very short-term sighted, looking quarter after quarter. But if you look at all the companies that are extremely successful, they don't look at the short term. They look at long-term vision, etc., in terms of what they're trying to build and the kind of legacy they're trying to create, and they benefit over the long term. So I think CFOs' roles have evolved a lot. It's no longer just doing the books and creating financial statements. It's well beyond element of that, and data makes it very easy to sort of communicate certain things, right? Numbers speaks volumes. Numbers, as a good saying in the financial world, numbers don't lie, and that is a fact. And you can communicate a lot with your team, your organization, with your customers, with numbers, and share that transparency to see the impact of their contribution as well too, which I think makes a very positive impact. So it's a very long-winded answer, but to answer your question, it's beyond just the X's and O's now.
And do you look at things to do with, we spoke about culture earlier, and this is not just for you, Siddiq, but others to join in as well to answer this. Do we really look at data nowadays, especially within the built environments? I know we look at, there's one aspect to it, as mentioned by Ghassan earlier, which is a customer satisfaction and customer experience, etc. What about the actual staff, your organization internally, how satisfied they are, how happy they are with the processes and procedures and the policies within the organization? Is there some sort of KPIs? And maybe Ghassan, you'd be able to answer this, because I know you've done a lot of work in terms of KPIs within your MBA. But is there a way to look at KPIs through data and develop the right decisions for staff?
Definitely there is. So as I mentioned previously, your balanced scorecard is divided into 4 categories. 2 out of their categories are internal, right? One of them is internal processes. So when you're building the internal processes, this is what you're thinking of. You're thinking of the culture, you're thinking of making it more or easier to your employees, giving them the best tools, etc. And the other one is learning and growth. You're even investing in your employees, which add to their culture. You're investing in their knowledge and their learning so they can grow within the organization. So definitely there will be more than one KPI focused internally and specifically on the processes and procedures.
Thanks. I'll wrap up with, yeah.
I'll just add in one point about measuring the employee performance. The turnaround time during processes is one element where we can actually measure performance of your people. And then the satisfaction, we have something where we have an employee NPS, and Net Promoter Score for our employees, right? What do they think of working in an organization, or would they recommend working in the organization, recommend their friends and families to work in the organization? And then there's the other part of development through succession planning. These all information and data play a very important role in managing the expectations of the employee, as well as giving them the satisfaction of their own performance and achievement.
Yeah, agreed. And I'll just add to that. I mean, we certainly see Serco, see ourselves as a people company. The amount of data we capture, I think I alluded to workforce management previously, of course, is about improving productivity and supporting the bottom line. But it's really about looking at fatigue management, looking at training, providing those motivational factors with respect to advancement, growth, recognition. Annually, we do an extensive research across every employee within Serco. We actually use a partner to do a lot of the analysis and look for correlation, because it's multidimensional data, to try and ultimately reduce attrition, to have people stay into Serco for an entire career. And that obviously provides us consistency in the way that we deliver our services. So KPI, statistical data on staff is absolutely vital for a successful organization.
Absolutely. That's a very good statement there, Paul, to wrap up with. I think data plays a vital role for the success of organizations, not only internally within their staff and etc., but also externally to have the right products in place and the right services to their clients and their customers. I thank you all the panel members for your contribution today. I would like to thank the audience for listening in and joining us today in this conversation by asking questions. Apologies for those questions that we didn't have time to touch on, but hopefully that we did provide the right information that would give you some thoughts in terms of how you can utilize data to make better decisions, or at least to consider data for making decisions within your organization. Without further ado, I'd like to thank you all and wish you all a good rest of the day and week, and enjoy the rest of the panels.
Thank you, everyone.
Thank you.
Thank you very much. Thank you.
Thank you.